Hey, it's Stetson. Today I've got a servo and 4 buttons. Anytime I push the button, one of the buttons, it goes to a very specific location on the servo. 0, 45, 90, and 135. Each of those buttons goes to that specific location and only that location. So if I go from 135 where I'm currently at back to the first button, it goes back to 0. Likewise, I go directly to 90 at the second button. Now, one thing I'll have you notice, and maybe push it up a little bit closer so you can see how my buttons are arranged. I don't have any resistors on the breadboard at all. That's mainly enabled because the Arduino itself already has a resistor within it, and so that enables you to be able to use buttons without throwing down resistors at all. I did this mainly for electrical simplicity that allowed me to use 2 wires, one to the ground and one to each of their pins, instead of the normal 3 wires you would have to use with every button, one to ground, one to 5 volt, and then one to each of their pins. Now, once programs start getting a little more complicated, I'm definitely going to start using resistors on each of my buttons, and we'll see that when we get to the coding section of this video. As things can get a little hairy without them. Well, let's get started on the coding. Alright, so we've got the code here from what we just saw. And as you can see, I actually have 2 variables for each button. That one to read in the button state from the button itself, and another to actually use that state within the program. Going down, we can kind of see why I say using resistors is a good idea in a larger program, because each and every one of these digital writes is actually set in the setting in the program, not the actual electronics part, but in the program itself, the button state to high, even though it is traditionally not what the Arduino would consider high. That's because without an actual resistor on each and every button itself, pressing the button actually reduces the voltage instead of increases it. So you have to set that to high and read it in as low, as you can see here. So you can kind of see why that would become an issue in a larger program. The way I accomplished each button on its own was a rather clunky method of using an if-else-if statement instead of a more sleek case statement. The reason for this is because I have 4 variables with one state each that it can be in, instead of 1 variable with 4 states. So if button 1 goes down to low, which means I pressed it, I set the variable POS to 0 and write that value to the servo, so it goes to 0. And that is the same for each and every state that I have. Button 2 goes to 45, button 3 goes to 90, and button 4 goes to 135. You could use a case statement with this, but it's not recommended, as you'd increase the size of your program for not much benefit and certainly not any better readability. You'd actually have worse readability, as you'd still need your if-else statement to dump those states into a variable with 4 separate states that you can then use in a case statement. You're still going to want to use your far more clunky and not at all nice if-else-if statement. But other than that, I'm definitely going to, in the future, attempt to use buttons with resistors in them with more complex programs. But for now, this works, and it works well. I think that's all I've got. Thank you.